Last time on Shadow Piece, the battle between Mihawk and Fujitora continued. They had a couple of exchanges of attacks before the Marine Admiral decided to use a strategy that he wasn't sure about the consequences it would have in the long run. Back during the war against the Revolutionary Army, Isho had been trapped in a different dimension for a while with reversed time, until he was in his late 20s again. But the only reason he had gotten that much younger was because he first had to figure out how to get back to the real world. So when he sent Mihawk to that dimension, he anticipated him to be locked in there for longer, maybe even so far that he would disappear from this universe. This was all meant to buy him the time he needed to avoid the vision of the future he had with his advanced observation haki. Gravity Prism was the last word Mihawk heard when the orb expanded and enveloped him. It wasn't painful, but when he looked around, he saw what had really happened. He wasn't standing on any ground, there was no up or down, it was all just a realm outside of where they had just been. Truly a prison in another dimension. Mihawk sighed. He had known that Fujitora mainly wanted to delay him, but he didn't expect to find himself in a place like this. Well, time to test if this is something that can be cut. Still in Hachinosu, Fujitora looked relieved that his technique actually worked, but he also feared the possible consequence. The place he had sent Mihawk was the same he had found himself after his clash with Morley, the dimension with twisted time that made him young again. But the relief didn't last long, as he already saw a cut in the space in front of him. No way! He jumped backwards, and then used his gravity powers to fly into the sky. Took me so long to get used to that place, and finally escape with my powers, and you just do it this fast? You truly are a monster. With another slash, Mihawk further opened the cut in between dimensions and stepped out of it. He had gotten about 10 years younger. He looked at his own body and just smirked at Fujitora. Guess I will hold the title of World's Strongest Swordsman for even longer now thanks to you. Yoru raced to point its tip towards Fujitora. Mihawk was curious to test out his regained youth. His first slash with the younger body was uncontrolled. The wild energy of a 33-year-old man ravaged the battlefield and took Fujitora by surprise. While he managed to hold it back and then send it flying towards the sky away from himself, he still got cut. First blood. Dripping from the palm he had used to hold back the attack was undeniably the blood of the Admiral. So much destruction. I guess you had more muscles when you were this old, A sound assessment, because his technique couldn't have gotten worse, so there must have been something else that had changed. The suave swordsman smirked. Around this time of my life, I realized that there was a limit to the power one could achieve by bulking up. So I decided to cut down my muscles and refine my technique even more. Another swing, and this time Mihawk, for the first time in this battle, used a name technique of his, Kokuto, Tiger Hunt. Except, this wasn't a technique he had ever used before. It was something he had just come up with, right this moment, and the tiger that was being hunted was none other than the purple tiger of the Marines, Fujitora. The energy around Mihawk spiked up. A furious but still controlled aura shot into the sky as he rushed forward to Fujitora. With swift movements, he jumped between the gravity attacks of the Admiral and closed the distance between them, all the while holding Yoru behind him with both hands. Once he was directly below Fujitora, he swung his blade up to the flying tiger, cleaving through the ground and hitting directly against a gravity barrier strengthened by haki that the Admiral had created to guard himself. At first it managed to do its job, and during that time Isho shot gravity attacks at Mihawk, cutting him in multiple places and damaging him for the first time. But then the Tiger Hunt went through and sliced through the center of the gravity user. His positioning helped him in minimizing the damage, but the cut was still deep, all the way up his chest. Really tried to go for the kill, despite knowing I'm just here to stall you. Fujitora let out a hearty laugh and looked at the youth and swordsman. The world government will hate me for having made you younger, but knowing them, they probably are focused on something very different. The Marine Admiral remained in the sky and looked down at Mihawk. While I am curious myself who is stronger between the two of us, I have no need to continue this battle. He started to fly away and just spoke to Mihawk at the same time. You better rescue who you came here for fast, or the storm of darkness will take you down together with her. The world's strongest swordsman just sighed and put Yoru on his back again. So he only needed to stall for this short to change the future he saw. A dark energy started to hang over Hachinosu, bathing the ragged cliffs and gigantic stone skull of Pirate Island in a pale, ominous light. The wind howled through the alleyways, carrying with it the stench of blood, sea rot, and gunpowder. Screams echoed in the distance. This island was chaos incarnate because of the ongoing war, and through it strode Dracula Mihawk. Black coat swaying behind him like a shadow untethered from its master. His boots clicked rhythmically against the weather-worn stone, and then members of the Blackbeard Pirates had noticed him. Some were too stupid to realize who he was, others were too shocked to do anything, and others were desperate enough to draw their weapons. The first one lunged. Mihawk didn't stop walking, a flash of black steel, a splatter against the wall. He didn't even need to take the small knife from his necklace, much less Yoru from his back. All he did was cover his arm with haki and slash it towards the grunts. The second tried from above, a crude axe swing raised with a scream. Mihawk glanced up, a twist of his wrist. The pirate dropped mid-air, blade still in hand, eyes wide with the shock of his own finality. By the third, the others had learned. Whispers spread through the shadows. It's really him. Why is he here? Run! Mihawk neither spoke nor acknowledged their fear. He had only one target tonight, and it wasn't them. He passed through a rusted gate, two iron doors hanging open like broken jaws, and descended into an old fort's underbelly. Torches flickered in the damp halls, casting long shadows against the moss-ridden stone. Prison stank of sweat and hopelessness. She, however, was here. He had sensed it even before he had set foot on the island. A scream rang out, shrill and furious. Perona. Mihawk's pace quickened for the first time in a while. The ever-calm warrior was rushing, and he couldn't even recall himself when was the last time he had felt the need to do so. He turned the corner, and there she was, suspended by sea stone chains in a narrow stone cell, her parasol discarded in the corner, broken and covered with blood. Two pirate guards stood nearby. One was wielding a whip, and it was obvious that he was the reason that Perona had screamed just now. They were laughing crudely, unaware of the silence descending behind them. One never heard Mihawk, only the wind as his arm carved the air. Both were dead before they even knew that they had been cut. Perona lifted her head, eyes widening. Her gothic dress was torn at the sleeves, and her usual bratty confidence had been dulled by exhaustion. But the moment she saw him, even though he was younger, the weight of days, maybe even weeks of captivity lifted just enough for her lips to tremble into the faintest pout. "You came," she said, voice small, disbelief threaded through every syllable. He had expected Maria, or maybe Absalom, or maybe some other member of the Fleet of Death to show up and rescue her. She was certain that they would come, and she could feel her adoptive father's presence on the island already, but this man wasn't someone she expected. Mihawk stepped over the bodies and walked towards the prison cell. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a small dagger from his necklace and cut through the sea stone chains with practiced ease. As her body slumped forward, he caught her, one arm slipping behind her back, the other beneath her knees. She looked up at him, pink hair clinging to her cheeks. "You're late," she whispered, though her voice cracked and tears welled up already. That was what she said, despite never expecting him to come anyways. After all, she knew how much Mihawk despised places like this. "Came precisely when I meant to," Mihawk replied coolly, his voice as calm as the still surface of a deadly lake. Perona let out a breathless laugh that hitched halfway into a sob. He clutched his coat tightly, burying her face in his chest for just a moment. He did not embrace her back, but he did not pull away either. They stood like that, frozen in time, as if the world outside, the lawless island, the blood, the chaos, had been carved away by the same blade that brought him to her. "I thought you didn't care," she murmured. "Don't," he said flatly. Then after a beat, "Simply dislike it when people mess with what belongs to me." She hits his chest softly. "Jerk." A faint twitch of his lip. Not quite a smile, but enough to make her eyes widen again. With one smooth motion, he lifted her into his arms fully. "Let's go," he said, turning back towards the exit. "Wait, my parasol!" He paused, gave her a flat look. She pouted again. "It's important." Despite it being broken into pieces, it was still a dear memory for Perona. It was made by Maria, and one of the first gifts he had ever given her after adopting her. With a sigh, not of frustration, but something far quieter, more resigned, he stepped back, picked up the parasol pieces and slid it into the crook of his arm. As he carried her out of the prison, cutting down the last 3 pirates who dared block their path, the island's dark atmosphere followed them, leaving behind a trail of silence in Mihawk's wake. And though he never looked down at her, never softened his expression, his grip on her was steady, unyielding, if to say, "You, never alone." In 2 other parts of the island, Moria and Absalom could sense the spectacle happening. They had no idea why Mihawk was rescuing Perona, but in this case, they just trusted him. Neither of them were yet to start any serious battle themselves, and only dealt with weaker lackeys of the Blackbeard Pirates. However, both of them thought the exact same thing at this moment. Well, now that Perona is safe, there is no need to be careful any longer. This island can now disappear, for daring to steal one of us. The island began to shake with a kishi and a beast's roar, as one of the goals of the Alliance of Death had already been fulfilled. And this is the end of today's episode of Shadow Piece. I hope you liked it. This is the end of the Mihawk part of this story, because now Mihawk has taken Perona to a bit of a safer place. Well, technically they haven't left the island yet, but it's not like anyone would dare stop Mihawk from just taking her from the place. After all, Moria and everybody else that Blackbeard wanted to come here is already there. So, yep, Perona is safe. Huge W. But for now, that's all from me for today. All that's left to be said is stay happy, stay healthy, and most importantly, stay cultured. Pyro, out. Bye.